Hello, everyone. Semi-retired Bob here. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today is one of those special miscellaneous odds and ends days. I have Pim Jansen with me. You are going to like her. I'm sure most of you already know her, but just in case they don't know you, Pim, could you go ahead and give us a brief introduction and tell us about your background?
Yeah, so I've been low carb, keto, carnivore, whatever you want to call it. I'm not actually carnivore. I'm more ketovore, I would say, for close to 20 years now. I've definitely been keto for the last 18 years. And I've always been interested in nutrition. So my background is I have a degree in nutrition. I've worked as a personal trainer. I discovered that it wasn't really what I was taught when I was studying nutrition because I was looking for answers that I didn't get from my studies. So after that, I actually learned everything that I know now post my degree. So now I know better and I'm better able to help people. But my real interest is actually in the addiction part because I've been a sugar addict for pretty much most of my life. And about 6 years ago now, I think. Wow, it's a long time now. I finally discovered the missing piece for me, which was related to emotional eating, and that's where my addiction came from. So now I'm helping people with food addiction, especially carb addiction, and I'm making videos on that on my YouTube channel.
That's good. Um, so there are many people out there that would say sugar addiction is not real, food addiction is not real. I, like you, disagree with all of those people. So we're going to take it as a given that food addiction and sugar addiction are real for the purposes of our discussions today. Um, so, to start with, how would you identify? How can we as people identify that we do have a problem with sugar? And how do we start to undo that?
If we look at addiction as something that has happened in the brain, what that is that it's a whole range of mechanisms that are happening. There would be a downregulation of the dopamine receptors, which is one of the neurochemicals in your brain that will give you a lot of satisfaction when you're eating, for example, or you do other things that are addictive. To get to that stage, you need to have abused that substance for a while, usually. There are probably exceptions to that, which often has to do with childhood trauma and like an actual deficiency in the dopamine receptors to start with. But if we're looking at food addiction, for example, it usually comes from you eating foods that are very pleasurable, and they are always highly processed foods. We're not talking about overeating meat or eggs, or even if you were finding wild berries, for example, it's probably going to be quite hard to get addicted to those. But what it is that when you're eating foods that give a lot of pleasure and they're very concentrated because they are processed, you don't have to digest them to experience all of the pleasure that you're going to get out from them and all of the tastes because they already pack them into a little package that you just pop in your mouth and you get all of it at once. So you're flooding your brain with dopamine, which is way more than your brain is actually, um, what's the word? Way more than your brain is accustomed to handling. So the signal is going to be way too strong. And that's why you're going to start down-regulating receptors with time. And that is going to build up what we call tolerance. You might have heard that when you're talking about drugs or something else, which means that you are always seeking the same high that you got from that food the first time you ate it, but you're not getting it because now you have less dopamine receptors. So what's happening is that you're going to want to eat more and more and more over time, and you're never going to be as satisfied. So you're always chasing that high. So that's how any addiction to anything develops. And you can easily see that with other things as well. It's like when I was a kid, I was happy to just, we got MTV and it was so much fun to just watch it. That shows my age, by the way. But now that wouldn't be satisfying. I would need to sit on my phone at the same time with a bowl of popcorn and do all the things just to flood my system with dopamine. So it's just something that builds up over time, and then you become addicted to it. Now, I don't want to say that everyone who has trouble with quitting carbs is necessarily addicted. Sometimes it's just emotional eating or a really bad habit, in which case it still works the same way. You can still break it the same way that you break an addiction. It's just going to be easy for you to do.
Do you have, I know a lot of your channel deals with this, so this is a really big question. So how do you have some first steps that people could take to start working on that addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. So a very easy way of doing it, like very easy and very focused way of doing it, is like we're looking at something called the habit loop. You can look it up on YouTube if you want to learn more about it. I teach 4 steps in the habit loop. You might just see 3 on YouTube, which is fine. But the first step is always you have a trigger. There's always going to be a trigger. And the trigger might be that you see the food, you walk into the supermarket, you can smell it. It might be a memory, someone talking about it, whatever it is. Something's going to trigger you to want to eat. Following that trigger, you're going to have a thought about it. And it's usually a very simple thought, such as, I want to eat, or chocolate would be nice, I need to get some chips, whatever it might be. You will have a thought, and that thought is going to make you crave the food, or it's going to give you an urge to eat. I'm talking about cravings and urges as the same thing. They're not necessarily the same thing by definition, but we just bunch them in because it's going to give you the same response. So when you get that, there is the next step in the habit loop is that you're going to act on that. And up until now, it's probably been you trying to fight it and resist doing it, or you just give in, you go and eat that thing, and then you get the reward, which will just perpetuate the whole cycle, and you will want to do it again because it feels really good to do. So if you can identify all of these steps, the easiest and the best way to interrupt is to interrupt at where you feel the urge. Be okay with feeling it without reacting to it. So you change the last step. So rather than go and eat it or resist it, you're just going to be okay with feeling that urge in your body. So if you have ever had therapy and you learned how to feel your emotions, you just do that because a craving is an emotion. But how I teach my clients to do it is just usually I ask them to close their eyes and just feel, where in your body do you feel it? I feel it in my jaw. I salivate, I get tension here, and then I get tension the whole way down to my belly. And then I just sit with that feeling and I feel it for 90 seconds. And I'm okay with feeling it. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. It might not be comfortable, but if we can accept that that's how it feels without trying to get rid of it, there's no longer any reason to go and eat it. So that's what I would suggest that you start with. Just identify those 4 steps and start sitting with that craving and just feeling it, and then choose to not eat. But even if you eat after you have sat with it, you have still started training a new neural pathway in your brain, which will lead to you accepting just feeling the cravings. And that with time, even if you still eat right now, is going to make it a lot easier for you to not eat in the future.
What are your thoughts on substitutes? Not just sugar substitutes, but in the same vein, like my personal weakness that I still battle with from time to time is pizza. And everybody's always talking about, well, you can make a cauliflower crust pizza, or if you're carnivore, you can make a pizza crust out of chicken and cheese and get your pizza that way. Me personally, I don't feel like those substitutes would do the same thing for me. So, do you think trying to create those substitutes for things you used to eat but know you shouldn't, is it healthy? Is it not healthy? Or, well, I'll shut up now and let you give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this is so good. I'm so glad that you asked this question. So first of all, yes, I think it can be useful when you're just getting started, if that feels like it's helpful to you. Now, let me just tell you, I'll make it brief, but I was keto for many years with substitutes. And the problem for me was that I was trying to make all these, keto brownies and I don't know, all desserts keto, and it was always full of almond flour and all of that sort of crap, which isn't really great. But it kept me low carb, fairly keto, and I wouldn't put on weight doing it necessarily. So in terms of the physiological ramifications of eating that way, that might not have been massive at the time, although there would probably have been quite a lot of oxalates in there. But I couldn't overeat these foods because I didn't really enjoy them. So the problem for me was, as you said, that it's not hitting the spot. I still crave the real thing. I still crave real sugar. And I was just trying to cover it up with something that didn't really do it for me. It isn't the same thing. It doesn't taste like the real thing. No matter how good other people say that it is, it never felt right to me. So whenever I would fail and fall off the wagon or decide I'm going to have a weekend where I'm going to have chocolate or ice cream, like the real thing, rather than just having a little bit of ice cream or having one bar of chocolate, I would buy all the things, because now I've been so deprived of these things for so long that I actually started binging. And I had never been binging before this. I just been addicted to the sugar and eaten it on a daily basis, but I had never been binging before. So this actually got me to gain weight. And the worst thing with it is that if you are depriving yourself, because this is what I was doing, I was depriving and I was fighting it, I was trying to substitute it with something else. So in my mind, I was forcing myself to not eat sugar. So when the pressure just builds up and you feel really awful. So when you are finally giving in, the dopamine release is going to be over the top. It's going to be like you're going to create an additional neural pathway in your brain, which says, when I've been deprived and I eat or I go on a binge, it's going to be so freaking good. So this neural pathway is even stronger than just the previous one that I had to eat sugar every day, a little bit here, a little bit there. I mean, yeah, I ate a lot of sugar, but not to this degree. So now I have two neural pathways, or two different ways of going into eating a lot of sugar, and they will also combine. So if I then stop doing keto for a while, I'm just eating sugar way more than I ever used to do. So this is a very good way if you want to deepen your addiction to do this. Now, not everyone reacts that way, but that's how I reacted. So if you're someone who needs these keto treats or substitutes or whatever it might be, whether that's pizza or keto brownies, doesn't matter. If you feel like you need them to stay on your diet, you're probably in trouble. You're not setting yourself up for an easy ride. But as I said, if you do it with the intention of just helping you through the first few weeks and then you cut them out, I think they can be useful. Now, the other problem with these foods is, yeah, cauliflower pizza might be okay, or chicken pizza crust might be okay. But when you start adding a lot of weird stuff like thickeners and almond flour and all of that, are you really doing what you want to do? Is this the best thing for your health? Or is it just a less worse thing than sugar? Which often is a really good excuse. Yeah, it's not as bad as sugar. So just ask yourself the question, like, why is it that you want to do this? Why do you want to have those substitutes? And if the answer is like, yeah, I just want to do it once in a blue moon because it's a fun thing to do, might be nothing wrong with that. But if you need it, then I think you might want to rethink that, because you're going to make your life pretty hard doing it that way.
Thank you for that. I do want to touch briefly on, since you are from both sides, both the physiological part of addiction and the psychological part of the addiction. Can you briefly explain differences between, how do I put this, carb hunger versus real hunger versus emotional hunger? Is there a way to tell the difference?
Yes, absolutely. So, well, I say yes, absolutely. A carb hunger is a false hunger. It's usually caused by your blood sugar being all over the place. If I have carbs to any significant degree, and for dinner, for example, the day after, I'm always more hungry, which tells me that something's up. And I'm not running on fat burning mode. Like I'm not burning ketones or whatever. I'm in carb burning mode. So this just makes me a lot more hungry. Maybe I'm like, my body is traumatized from what I was doing for many years when I was eating 6 times per day, and there would always be some carbs in it, because that's what I learned when I was in my early 20s, when I was a personal trainer. Like, you need to eat every 6 hours to keep your blood sugar stable. And that's what I was doing. And I was loving it because I could eat all the time and I just loved eating. So that was perfect. Now, that's the carb hunger. If you cut out the carbs, you're going to notice very quickly that you're not going to be hungry as often. So if you're eating carbs on a regular basis, any significant amount that is, I'm not talking about, up to 50 grams per day is probably going to be okay-ish. All the 50 can still make me a little bit hungry the next day. If you eat more than that, it's going to be really hard for you to differentiate between real hunger and carb hunger, because you're going to be hungry way more than what is natural for you to be hungry. But let's say I assume that most people who are watching your channel, they are going to be very low carb. So if you are low carb already, you shouldn't have the carb hunger. So then you have the two options left, which is what I like to talk about, and that is the emotional hunger and the real hunger. So this is how I would describe it. Like, a real hunger is always in your belly. For me, it feels like it's a very hollow feeling. It might be grumbling, my stomach might be grumbling, and it's kind of moving around, and it feels like, I really need to eat. I need to put something there to get rid of the hunger. It can come in waves. It can be hunger pangs. They might go away for a while and then they come back. So it's not a constant thing. They're always like up and down, up and down. That's real hunger. And when you notice that it's in your belly area, like the signal comes from here and it travels up here. But when it is an emotional hunger, it always starts up here. It starts with you thinking about something. I would really like that. I wonder if I'm hungry. Yeah, I could probably eat. When you have those thoughts, you're probably not hungry. That's probably a craving for something, and that's an emotional hunger. That happens to me still almost every day, because I want to go and eat when I want to procrastinate. And I want to procrastinate a lot. So I have to deal with that on a daily basis, I would say. I just want to, like, before I even think about it, I want to get out of my chair and go out into the kitchen and do something. And sometimes it's not even eating anymore. Sometimes I go and look in the cupboard or the fridge, or not with the intention of eating, but with the intention of food prepping. So I don't even need to eat. I just need to distract myself. But it's the same behavior. I used to go to the eating, but now since I don't do that anymore, it just replaces it with food prep or something else. So this is not the real hunger. So when you notice that it's starting with you thinking about food, wondering what you want, what would be nice right now, am I really hungry? When you have those thoughts and then you feel the hunger after that, if it's really hunger, it probably isn't, then it's probably emotional eating. I hope that answers the question.
I would like to go on to something that I've heard you talk about on several occasions, but I think my audience would find it very interesting. What are your thoughts about the differences between abstainers and moderators? And are you pigeonholed into one or the other, or are there ways you can adapt both of these to your life?
All right, so this is a can of worms. Yes, okay. So most people would be able to identify themselves as abstainers or moderators. And moderators are never the people that come to me for help, because they're fine, they don't need my help, they can moderate and life goes on. So everyone who comes to me for help, they will say that they need to abstain, otherwise they're just going to fall off the wagon and then they're going to go on a binge and so on. And this is where I would put myself in this category naturally. However, I do believe that it's a skill that you can learn. If you want to learn to be a moderator, you can do that. Now, I did this for probably 4 years. I just taught myself that I can still have sugar every now and then, because mentally I was not ready to quit. I wasn't ready to give up sugar for life. I just couldn't imagine what that would be like. And just the thought of doing that felt really scary to me, as if oh my God, I'm going to die if I do that, and that's never going to work for me. So sometimes I had sugar maybe twice a month, then maybe I went 3 months without it, and then I had some, but it was always controlled. Like I planned for it, I planned how much I was going to eat, and I was eating that amount. Now, I don't say that I was successful every single time while I was learning this skill, but I didn't go on a full-on binge the way that I did when I was dealing with the keto substitute, etc. So I would say it was a learning curve, and it went pretty well for me. And for long periods of time, I didn't really actually want the sugar, but I just had that security blanket that I can have sugar if I want it. Now, there is some work that you have to do when you do this, and it's not always mentally easy to do. So about almost 2 years ago now, I decided I'm going to go a whole year without sugar. And I did it. And I didn't want to add sugar back necessarily, but then I thought, why not? Just the option is there if I want it. Now, I don't want it most of the time anymore. And yes, life is so much easier to be abstaining because I don't have to deal with any cravings that might come after and me having to do the work again. It's just easier, and I like the way that that feels. But I have had sugar a couple of times. I don't eat so much sugar, and that's because I don't see a reason to do that when I don't feel for it, and it doesn't add anything to my life. But we do go out for dinners every now and then, and I might have a burger with a bun. But also, I have never been someone who's addicted to bread. For me, it's always been sugar. It's not the savory carbs. So that's not a problem, never been, and it won't be. But if I want a dessert, I am allowing myself to have a dessert. Usually I don't fancy anything on the menu, but if I want it, I can still do it. The only thing I have to be aware of is I might get cravings after that, and I will have to deal with the cravings and just sit through those cravings the way that I was talking about earlier and do the work. If I'm not prepared to do that work, I really should just abstain. But if I'm prepared to do the work, I can do it. And this is how I did it for several years. I was just deciding that if I'm going to have it, this is the price that I have to pay for having it so that I don't go off on a binge.
Do you consider, this is a question from a viewer, do you consider cheating / self-sabotage to be something that you can incorporate into your normal routine, not necessarily every day, but once a week or once a month or anything like that? Or if we're trying to be abstainers versus moderators, is something like that just going to throw us completely off the rails?
I love this question because my answer would depend on what your motivation for doing it is. Cheating, I mean, if people were looking at my diet, they would say that I cheat. Now, because I get headaches and migraines that don't go away if I'm zero carb. But I can be zero carb for between 5 and 14 days without getting the headaches. But as soon as I notice that there's a headache, the only way for me to get rid of it is actually to eat some carbs. So then I would be cheating. But I don't see it as cheating, I see it as my medicine. So I eat a little small portion of rice, which is maybe 40, maybe 50 grams of carbs if I'm eating a lot, which I usually don't because I don't even like rice that much. And then I'm done with that. If you consider that cheating, yeah, that can be really helpful, but it has a purpose. If you want to cheat because you are not, because you need to get rid of those cravings, like the pressure that it builds up, it's just the same thing that I did when I was doing keto with the keto treats. It's just like you're building up that pressure and then, oh my God, now I'm going to have a cheat day and I'm just going to eat all the things. That's probably not useful from an addiction perspective. Could it be useful from another perspective? Yeah, maybe. Sometimes having like a huge refeed with even including carbs can be helpful if you, for example, are trying to change your, lose weight or whatever it might be, and you've been restricting for a while. It can be useful from a metabolic perspective. But then I don't want you to see it just as an opportunity to pig out, because that's just going to keep that addiction alive and feed it and have that be an ongoing thing in your life. And that's going to turn into a very unhealthy relationship with food. So I would say, like, if you're cheating, does it have a real purpose that is beneficial for your life? Or is it just to relieve the pressure? If it's just to relieve the pressure, I would prefer that you learn a different way of dealing with it that is healthy for you and helps you relate to food in a way that is healthy and helpful for you moving forward.
And to go on into another question I got from a viewer, do you recommend any supplements that might help with cravings, or is that just chasing a pipe dream?
No, I don't recommend any supplements to help with cravings because I don't believe that they work. I've tried all sorts of things, chromium, and I've tried all types of amino acids because I heard that, addiction to foods, it can be an amino acid like imbalance in your brain, so you don't produce the right neurochemicals. I've tried so many things and none of that worked for me because I had an emotional eating issue. I'm not saying that everyone will have an emotional eating issue, but I think that's probably one of the components that almost everyone has, because no one in our society has been taught how to deal with emotions. We just want to eat them away or get rid of them in some other way. Now, some people might have a gut microbiome that is really unbalanced and that will make you crave a lot of carbs. That is one thing, and you could maybe deal with that to lessen the cravings. I've had people who say, like, when I'm eating like no carbs at all, I don't have cravings anymore. Or when they go on carnivore, the cravings disappear. I think that has a lot to do with the gut microbiome, in which case that's brilliant. But if you're already on that diet and you still have cravings, I don't think that is your problem. So my recommendation is that you just learn how to accept having cravings and be okay with having cravings, because if you do, it doesn't really matter what the reason for your cravings are. It can be anything and you still have the same solution. You don't have to deal with it. You're just okay with actually having them.
Could you talk for just a moment? Because I've heard some, if you want to call them buzzwords, out there in the vlogosphere and such. Do you have thoughts on a food scarcity mindset versus food freedom? And what does all that really mean?
Yes. Okay. So food scarcity is something that I have a lot of myself. It's like just leaving food on the plate, or whenever someone's offering me anything that is free, it's like, oh my God, I need to eat it because someone gave it to me, which is crazy because there's food everywhere in our society. No one is going to starve to death in this society. So it's this fear that we have, which is just coded in our DNA, that as soon as we see an opportunity to eat, we should take that opportunity to eat because there might not be any food later on. But that's not true where we live today and how things are working out today. So when we're talking about food scarcity, it's something that is entirely, psychological, even though it's in your genes to react that way. You are wired to react that way. But we have to override that with our like with the prefrontal cortex, with the brain that is actually aware of what's happening and that is planning for us to do what's good for us, rather than letting the reptilian brain run the show. Because if it does, then that we're just gonna jump on every single opportunity. So we need to reprogram the brain to think a little bit differently about these foods that are offered to us everywhere, and see how they're not actually helping us. Like, we are missing out on a lot of things, but not food. What we're missing out on is living life. We're missing out of having a healthy body. We're missing out of being at a healthy weight by giving into all of this food scarcity. Now, food freedom, because you mentioned that as well, is like the opposite. Food freedom is when you eat what you want to eat that your prefrontal cortex has decided that you want to eat, not the lizard brain. When you feel like these are the foods that are good for me, these are the foods that I want to have on my menu regularly, when you can stick to those and be okay with just eating those foods, you're on your way to food freedom. I want to add another part, which is we don't have to be scared of any carbohydrates. We don't have to be scared of the sugar. We don't have to be scared of the real pizza. We don't have to be scared of any of that. If that is an event for you that you do, I don't know, every 3 months, you get together with your friends, you're going to have pizza night, and you want to do that because you just want the whole experience, doesn't mean that you're an addict. It doesn't mean that you're going to fall off the wagon. It doesn't mean that you're going to go on a binge. It just means that you're having a good night where you enjoy all the pieces. The only thing I ask of my clients when they do this is eat with awareness. Don't just sit and just stuff yourself without even thinking about what you're doing. Just eat it, taste it, and really enjoy it when you're doing it. And by just doing that, you're not going to stuff yourself with that pizza. You're probably going to stop way earlier than you ever did in the past, because now there is no food scarcity. You allow yourself to have anything that you like on occasion, but with awareness. Like the deal that you've made is that I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this food while I'm eating it. And just make sure that you're there. You give yourself the permission to do that. There shouldn't be any feelings of I'm doing something wrong when you're doing it. You decide beforehand that this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to enjoy this evening. That to me is food freedom. And then the day after, you just go back and eat the things that you normally eat, and you feel completely okay with it, because this was an exception that you did. It was not part of your normal eating. It doesn't mean anything about who you are, that you're an addict, that you can't stop eating carbs, that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean any of those things. Just like we don't choose to do healthy things 100% of the time in our life. Sometimes we want to do things just because they're fun or because of any other reason. And as long as you're okay with that reason, you're doing the right thing for you. That's freedom.
Thank you. That brings me into what I was thinking about. What I did last year on my channel, I had a Thanksgiving Day plan where I, of course, was going to fill up on all of the meats, but then I was going to allow myself to have a piece of pie or a piece of cake for dessert at my cousin's house. But what I was telling my people on my channel at that time was plan ahead, so that rather than wondering what you're going to eat the next day to get yourself back into your plan attack of eating, have your favorite carnivore meal thought out, maybe even pre-cooked, ready to go in the fridge for the next day to help you get back on track. Do you think that's a good plan, or am I pushing a bad idea on people?
No, I think that's brilliant. I think that's really good. Just make it as easy as you can for yourself. If that is pre-cooking your next meal, I'm all for it, because then it's there. You already know what you're going to do. It's so much easier to choose to do that rather than if you don't have anything, you just open up for the brain to choose. And if you have cravings at this time, we know that it's going to be a lot harder for you to actually stick with what you're normally doing. So I think that's really good advice.
Okay, we have come to the point in the interview where I need to ask you to talk to us for just a few minutes. You're sitting here in front of my audience. If there's anything that you like to talk about that I forgot to ask, and also what I would like is if you have any advice for people that are just getting started and they're having problems with cravings, what kind of advice would you give them?
Okay, I'll start with the second part first. So if you're just getting started, I think what you need to focus on is not so much on being perfect. It's just to take one little baby step each day, make each day a little bit better than the previous day. Excuse me. So when I'm saying that, it's like just because you decide to start tomorrow doesn't mean that you have to cut all of it out. Some people want to do that and they can be successful doing that. Some people want to do that, but they know that they're not going to be successful doing that because it's going to be too much. So I just if that's the case, I mean, I do have a free course on this as well that you can look up, that you can sign up for, which teaching what I said about the habit loop and how to sit through the cravings. The best thing to do is just commit to doing that exercise. Commit to sit with every single craving and let go of the outcome. It doesn't matter if you eat after you've done it or if you don't eat after you've done it. Success is for you to just practice that behavior. Because when you practice it enough times, if you do it 100 times successfully, I bet you that you're not going to go and eat anymore. So you don't even have to focus on that. You have to focus on the skill that you need to develop to get good at. That's where you need to go. And that's where most of my clients fail in the beginning, is that they focus so much on the result. And they come to me and say, oh, Pim, I had this and that this weekend and it really didn't go that well and I failed and all of the things. And I just asked them, did you sit with the craving beforehand? Yeah, that's success. There is no pressure to do anything else than that in the beginning. Now, it can also be useful to try and cut down on the carbs so that you don't get those false hunger signals that we talked about, because that just makes everything much harder to do. So that's why it's so much easier for me when I work with people who are low carb, because they don't have that and we don't have to deal with that. So that's really good. And then you asked, is there anything else that I want to talk about? And I want to talk about the black and white thinking that we have, which almost everyone has to some degree, and which is very related to this. Like, I have to be perfect or I failed. What if, like, being perfect is something that very few people are? You don't have to abstain, be successful 100% of the time for you to be successful with what you're doing. You just have to continue doing the right thing, the thing that you want to do, more often than you did before, and keep moving in that direction. So with that is, like, when I started out and when I started eating, I said I wasn't successful every single time when I planned to have sugar. Sometimes I wouldn't really stick to my plan, but if I'm looking at it objectively, I never had the binge again the way that I had when I was being keto and had cheat weekends. I never had that. Whenever I would fall off the wagon, I would still be eating so much less than I had ever done in the past. It's just like the next step. So you're going to notice I have a client now who did really, really well for several weeks, and then she went off plan for no apparent reason at all. I'm not going to go into why, but to her, that was a fail. And it was like she had some blueberries, some nuts. I think there might have been some banana cake or whatever. And like, we're talking one slice. It wasn't like a bag of chips and a tub of ice cream and 2 bags of cookies and a pizza. So the amount of food that she needed to kind of get back on track was not over the top. And this is a win as well. It's a step in the right direction. So if you can learn to look at, okay, what are the changes that have happened? How is this still, even though it's not perfect, how is this better than what happened in the past? And just see all the wins along the way and acknowledge the effort and the work that you have put in. If you can go 3 days without eating any sugar or processed carbs, and in the past you haven't been able to do it at all, that's a win. If you can do 3 days, you can do 4. So don't let any failure be the reason that you stop doing what you're doing. Because when you let the past decide who you are, you're going to fail in the future as well, because you're only looking at the failures in the past. So if you let that define you, you're always going to be a failure. You need to look at the changes that you made and the success that you've had, and realize that if you have done this once, you can do it again. And you just take it one step at a time or one day at a time, and eventually you're going to be where you want to be.
Did you guys hear what she just said? She goes at it from a different angle than I do. But remember, you only have to get 1% better every day. And don't let being a perfectionist get in the way of progress. Thank you so much for that, Pim. That was amazingly good. I know you have a YouTube channel and you offer some coaching, but go ahead and tell us all of the things and the places that we can find you at and where they go if they actually want to connect with you and get some private coaching.
Yeah, I think the best place to go is actually to my YouTube channel. So you can just search for my name and you will get there. And on that channel, you will probably find the links to all the other things. If you click on any of my weekly videos, underneath you will find a link to all my other social media. It's one link. So that's probably the best way to start, or you can send me an email at pim@pimjohnson.com if you are struggling to find it. And for those of you who are interested in just learning how to kind of survive the holiday period without going on a binge, I'm going to have a 2-hour workshop on Saturday, the 18th of November. That's Eastern Standard Time, US time. And if you want to attend that one, you can also just send me an email, get in contact somehow. Or if you want my free course, you can find that on the same link as well, the one that I talked about, if you just want to learn how to sit through your cravings. So there are many ways that you can get in contact with me, but on my YouTube channel, you will find some videos. I'm always talking about these subjects that we've been talking about. Lately, I've been showcasing a bit. I have a new emotional, intuitive keto group that I'm doing, and they are losing a lot of weight. So that's kind of exciting. So that's what I'm doing up until Christmas, or maybe a couple of weeks before. But you will find me there, and soon I'm going to be rebranding the YouTube channel a little bit, but I haven't even mentioned it on my channel, so I'm not going to spill the beans here, but new things are happening. So that's probably the best way to get in contact with me, or easiest for you guys anyway. And I can give you the link to the workshop if you want to put it up underneath the video as well.
Thank you for being here today, Pim. And all of the stuff that is going on her channel right now, I did not ask her about that because it's an ongoing process, and I didn't want to make her spill the beans early. But everyone, don't forget to get down in the comments and thank Pim for her time today, because everyone's time is valuable, especially people like Pim who have great things going on out there. I can tell you from personal experience that I have taken her free course. It is amazingly good. And her free course for those of you that can afford things, and it's not really very expensive, but she does have a couple of paid courses as well that I would like to do. We'll see how my finances go. But again, get down there, thank her for her time. And don't forget, folks, get out there, be 1% better today, tomorrow, every day. Have a great day, folks. We'll see you in the next one.